Erin, you mentioned sole traders as one of the simplest models and the first in the choices that we should be considering. What are the pros and cons of being a sole trader?
The sole trader itself is effectively just a really quick and easy way of setting up the business. So one of the big pros and advantages of it is all you really need to do is talk to HMRC, obtain what's called a UTR number, so that's your unique tax reference number. With that gives you the ability really to set up as a business as a sole trader and go from there. It's also really quick and easy to kind of shut down as well. So if you have got like a part-time position, so maybe you've got a little bit of freelance work that you're going to do for 3 months or something, then, tax advantages aside, it might be much more beneficial just to open up a sole trade or set yourself up as a sole trader business, take in that income, declare it on your tax return, and it's really straightforward and really easy. There's a lot less administration with sole trader in terms of having that public persona, so having your information put on company's house or anything like that that you can have
do any of that, do you?
with limited companies and everything. So it really is, there's kind of, it's almost a starting way into business, if you like. It's not necessarily the most effective way and efficient way of starting a business, but it can be seen as the simplest way of just starting up. There is a few disadvantages, just like everything else. It's potentially not the most tax efficient way, as I kind of alluded to, and also with a sole trader as well, you don't have as much protection as you would if you set up a limited company. So if you are creating quite a large business and God forbid, your business can't pay a certain creditor or something or anything like that, then unfortunately it could be your personal assets that are up that might need to be taken in consideration.
And this is because the sole trader business isn't divorced in the eyes of the law from the person who's actually had the idea for that business and is running that business. Is it they're very much smashed together, so they're one and the same in terms of assets, liability, risks.
Exactly right. So, you don't have any protection. It's just a case of, that business that you've developed and everything else, that is all in your name. It's you personally. So yeah, it's you, unfortunately, that if there was any downsides to the business and there was any issues in terms of liquidity, then it's unfortunately it could potentially be your personal assets that are for risk. So
and I think on the financial side, that's interesting, isn't it? Because my impression of sole traders is that you've got fewer options available to you just in terms of raising money or having access to other money too. Presumably you could still get a loan from the bank, but it might be harder to do that perhaps. You obviously can't raise money through investors because there's no entity for them to invest in. So it's quite a constraining model. As you say, it might be great to start out with if you just want to test an idea. And I think a lot of people, particularly in the creative industries, seem to start out by testing, are my designs going to sell? Is my wonderful cupcake range going to be something that people will want? But if you really have aspirations to grow, sole trader is quite a hard model to grow from, isn't it?
Yeah, because essentially it is just you as an individual and it's you as a person. And also when we're talking about stakeholders and potential for getting capital put in, they will see it as a much more risky element to look at, because you're not having to, when you do a set of accounts, so you're looking at the profitability of how that business is doing, you're not governed by as much laws and regulations as a limited company is. So from their point of view, you could show them a really impressive balance sheet and profit and loss account and everything else, but although it may be signed off by an accountant, there's no kind of emphasis of how that is being put together. There's no laws and regulations of how that is done. So from their point of view, they see it as a lot more risky, because you could kind of, manipulate, it's not the right word, but you could kind of put together a more rose-tinted glass approach of what your business is doing, and the lenders are aware of that, and that's why they find it much more risky. And also be aware as well, it's you personally that's being affected by credit ratings and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you don't have that advantage of having a separate legal entity that is generating its own.
So that's a good point, isn't it? So if you're not running your business as well as you could be running it, and for example you get black marks against your name or credit rating issues, that's going to affect personally, your ability to take loans, maybe get mortgages, all sorts of things around that as well.
Exactly right, exactly right. It's one of those considerations that really should be taken very, very soon on in the business life cycle of, is sole trader right for me?
Yeah, and I think although it is a simple model, it's almost deceptive in terms of the responsibilities that still come with it. You're still running a business. You're still interacting with other people, selling to people. There is a moral as well as a kind of financial responsibility that does come with that, both to yourself as well as to the people that you're dealing with.
Exactly, and the brand that you're developing is purely just you. There's no kind of way of selling that brand on or in that set. So you've got to really consider what your business aspirations are, how far you want to run with it, and then that really just dictate on, is sole trader right for you?
You touch on another point that's really interesting there. I mean, I'm a massive believer, I'm boring about this, that every business starts and grows with IP, and you're creating IP right from the start of that journey, whether that's the IP and the idea that you've manifested in some way, or it's the product that you're making, or the logo that you've designed for your business. It's much harder, isn't it, for a sole trader to demonstrate that kind of all-important core IP value if it's your name. Your name's very hard to trademark, particularly if it's got common elements to it. You're all already on the back foot, aren't you, in terms of being able to demonstrate a value proposition?
Yeah, it would make it much more difficult. And also, depending on what your long-term aspirations are, it makes it a lot more difficult to trade that value as well.
Yeah.
So if you are, have you got this great idea that one day you might want to sell, if it's just you as a sole trader business, you're going to find it much more difficult to put a value to that and have that value go forward. So, these are really important items you need to consider before doing that. And as we've touched on other conversations we've had and other guides we put together, the tax implications as well. There's quite a big difference between sole trader versus limited versus all the other things we're about to discuss.
So definitely something to be aware of, because you're going to get less relief and fewer options in terms of claiming back tax too than you would with some of the other models.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I think that's it's a really good point. I know when we've spoken to investors, and obviously most businesses at startup phase that are growing are speaking to investors at some point. If they're not sole traders or freelancers, one of the first things you get asked is, do you own your IP? What's the value of that IP? Can you prevent anybody else from free riding on that? So obviously as a sole trader, you're not prevented from registering trademarks, but it becomes much harder when it's just you to demonstrate, yes, this is a business that's kind of controlled and has value that's almost beyond the individual that's spearheading it.
Yeah, definitely. And also you've got to consider as well how big you want to perceive your business to be.
Yeah.
There are really big sole traders out there, and people do appreciate that they're endless scalability with them. But if you're going for one of those bigger contracts or whatever it is that you're looking to be trying to build your business on, then sometimes having that limited company or as opposed to here where you're just a sole trader, it can be seen as it's not as professional, it's not as everything else. So there's that perception as well that is really important to consider when it is sole trader the right fit for you.
I think that's you make a really good point there as well. It's about your aspirations for this business too. If you want to sell to Tesco's, if you want to consult for a large corporate or a bank perhaps, so you might have been an employee before and now you're going to sell your services back, probably for more than you were paid as an employee. If you want to court investors and others, obviously what you really want is to pass their due diligence checks, and in a lot of cases for a sole trader that can be really hard to do because they'll be looking for systems and processes, protection for the IP we mentioned already, that sort of financial stability, the business continuity as well. What happens if you go under a bus tomorrow? I mean, for a sole trader, you are that business, so it's far harder actually to sort of tick through those often procurement regulated processes that are binary. It's a yes or no, do you tick the box? You often don't get the chance to explain or add more detail. So these are all good points, I guess. It's a very simple model, but if you've got aspirations to grow, this may not be the model that you want to stick with for long term.
Exactly right, yeah.
Great, thank you.